that what you said?
I didn't say that.
You didn't? Okay, you can lie right now. It's fine. You can lie. Do you have any issues with me at the moment? Do you have anything you wish to say to me?
I don't. All I've got to say is this is a private estate.
This may be a private estate, but can I ask you this? Is trespass a criminal offence?
It's trespass a criminal offence. It is.
Trespass is a criminal offence.
A private estate.
Please. Trespass isn't a criminal offence.
Let's
See it matter. My name's Matt.
Should we go and have a chat somewhere else?
No, I'd much prefer to do it here, mate.
Okay. What's been going on?
I was here. I was just chatting with some people. These council officers come over to me. They request I have a licence. Now, I know full well in the licensing, it's written that someone public speaking without an amplifier is exempt. Yeah. You would have moved me on. Don't try and say it's if you would have listened, it would have been better. You would have moved me on. Yes, you are. That's exactly what you're trying to do.
At the end of the day, all we want to do...
Have you got the legislation yet?
So at the end of the day, all we want to do is just move on.
You say you want me to move on?
Don't move on, because you are a street performer. Yeah, I'll have to issue with a dispersal.
And then you told me I need a licence. On camera, don't lie. Then you told me I need a licence, and I've just shown you road legislation says specifically I don't need a licence.
I'm not trying to make any...
Oh, look, I've asked you to please leave me alone. Would you please leave me alone? I was talking to these guys here and these guys here.
He's asked you to leave him alone. There's no longer an issue. Stop trying to enforce...
Do me a favour, I'm starting to feel really distressed by this now. Can you please leave me alone? I've asked you please to leave me alone.
Let's go. Let's go. You have to leave. Please leave me alone, man.
Good luck with all your legal beagle stuff.
Thank you, officers. So you've come forward, having an impact statement, you've come forward to issue CPNs. Clearly says CPNs cannot be issued prospectively to prevent conduct. Now you've come forward to do this. It also clearly says in section 3.9, decisions on whether conduct is persistent or continuous should be taken on a case-by-case basis. Okay, you're associates.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm going to say to you is, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to perform, you have to have a permit to perform. No one is against that.
Why do you believe that I should ask for permission to express myself in a public place?
No, it's a private football.
No, hang on.
It's open to the public.
No.
Yeah?
It's public-private partnership. Your mandate as a body is to grow the art and culture, which I am part of, and to supply public access to this area. So this place is a public place.
Listen to what
listen to what I said, because what you said is wrong. This is a public place. There are no fences, there are no walls, there are no boundaries to stop me accessing this area. I have not opened the gate, and I have not forced entry upon anything. I am, at this moment, if you try and claim this is your private property, I am in civil trespass, and I will tell you to get an injunction. Go get your injunction, because I'm going to be here in this public place, freely in this public place, until you do so.
Are we on?
Yeah.
Is anybody watching?
Yeah, we got people out there.
All right. My name's Melvyn, and next to me is Matt. Well, he's not next to me. He's somewhere over the other side of London. And this is part 2 of Matt's story about his life as a street performer. And the first part was really about developing an act and learning to be how to perform, etc., etc. I'm still laughing, having just watched the video, the idiocy of the various officials who know nothing about the law approaching Matt. But back to Matt. Why am I still laughing about it? Matt has not only been a street performer, but he's been an incredible advocate for free speech in public spaces. And I think most of this interview is going to start to cover that, and it's really important and a bit farcical at the same time as to the way officials behave. I'm going to leave it up to you, Matt, to start rather than asking a question, because you know where you want to begin part 2 from.
Okay, so I suppose the best place to start is why. Why did I have the intonation or the inclination to do what I do. And I think a lot of it comes down to my father and things when I was young. And I'm not going to dwell on it too long, because I know that a lot of times people talk about the kids, it's the most droll and dry thing possible. But I was the son of a coal miner. And my father was a coal miner. He went from being 15 years old in the coal mine all the way up to being a foreman. We had essentially a working class value, kind of middle class life as I was a child. I was born in 84. And so for the first 7 years of my life, we were reasonably well paid working in a coal mining family. And in 1993, the last coal mine anywhere near our area closed. I remember as a kid, when I was about 5 or 6, my father going to the coal mining protests, going to the marches. I remember the mines closing down and him sitting with me and telling me how it broke his heart, how he believed that everybody in the mines, everyone in the kind of the socialist-esque kind of industrial sector believed they were working for something. They believed they were working for the betterment of everyone. They believed they were all putting in for a better society, and that had a lot of value. And that when he left there, people were different. It felt like they'd stab you in the eye with a pencil to get 5 pence more an hour than you. And how it broke his heart. I remember him being kind of a broken guy after that. He later on in his life voted UKIP, went from being a Labour voter to a UKIP voter. My entire town died from the destruction of the mines. So I didn't realise at the time, but I think something got instilled in me, a sort of sense of standing up and trying to fight for what you believe in. And that's been a massive influence. I've only realised that later life in doing what I do. And the next thing that I suppose happened is, as a young person, I lived in squats, and living in squats, it encourages you to question authority. If a policeman's knocking at your door and says, please open the door, you have to say no. Otherwise, they're going to come in and they'll break the law and they'll kick you out. So it forces you to look at law, and it forces you to look at your interactions with authority figures or perceived authority figures and question whether what they're saying is valid. So when it comes to the point of me then performing for 3 or 4 years at the SouthBank and deciding to go out and spread my wings and try and find some other pitches to work, when I go to Trafalgar and the council and the police and every single authority figure you can imagine comes up to me and says, you can't do this, you have to leave. And I'm the only guy down there. In fact, it's a funny story. When I first went down there, they had pigeon feeders there still. This is before the banning of pigeons being fed in Trafalgar Square. So there's thousands of pigeons everywhere. But I thought this is a huge, big open space. God, it must have been about 2007. Must have been 2007.
So there was people pigeon feeding. And no statues, nothing else. We just had pigeon feeders.
The entire square was empty. Everything there was just pigeons and people feeding pigeons and tourists taking pictures of pigeons. And I thought, this is a huge space. I'm going to give it a go. Why not? And so I start to gather, and, I'm okay. I kind of know what I'm doing after 3 or 4 years. So as I start gathering a crowd and as the show starts picking up, this pigeon feeder, who I later found out had a career feeding pigeons, there was an industry in it. What they do is they put a grain of rice on somebody's arm. And when the tourists got the grain of rice on their arm and a pigeon would land and eat the rice, they'd take a picture with the pigeons on them. Then after the picture, the guy would say, give me some money for it. And they'd make cash from doing it. It was actually a regular income for these guys. So me doing shows there was kind of interrupting their income. So the guy walks up to me and he throws a handful of rice right in front of me. And then it must have been like 2,000 pigeons descend right in front of me. All my crowd starts backing off a little bit. And, I think, okay, maybe I can make them leave. So I stamp my feet and I move my arms and the pigeons fly up in the air and everyone moves back and the pigeons go straight back down again and start eating the rice. So it's a complete mess. I have to give up. I realize, okay, I can't work here because every time I start doing a show, the pigeon feed is going to destroy me. And I wasn't performance savvy enough to realize I could play with that. Nowadays, if that would happen, I'd go home, I'd write something to do with having lots of pigeons around you, I'd like to believe. And then you could make that an element of the show. Perhaps it'd be an incredibly strong element of the show. It's an interesting thing to happen. But at that time, I just thought, well, I better give up. I can't do it here, find somewhere else. And then the next year, they banned pigeon feeding. And they had these hawks fly around every morning to scare all the pigeons away. And so I thought, you know, wow, I'm going to go and give it a go. I'll go and try and do shows at Trafalgar. And literally the first day I was there, a police officer comes up to me and says, you can't do this here. And, you know, the experience of squatting made me think, well, you know, you've got a question, you've got to ask. They could just be talking crap. And so they'd give me one reason after another. One of the ones was, oh, it's begging. And then another one was, oh, you're blocking the high street. All these different reasons. And each person had their own little thing that they think they could get you on to remove you. They kind of more had a sense that you shouldn't be there. You conflicted with their sense of what was right, what was the right thing, the correct thing to be happening in a public space. And someone gathering people around and trying to draw attention seemed like something that wasn't proper to them. And so over the couple of years that I worked there, and I'd always say no when they tell me to go. I'd always say, no, I'm not going to do it. No, do what you want. You're going to have to arrest me then. And they'd usually leave. And I'd go home and I'd research the thing that they talked about that day. So when they turned around and told me, oh, you can't do it because you're begging, one of the police officers, in fact, turned around and went, you know, begging, bearing arms. And so I thought, oh, what the hell are you talking about? And I'd go home and I'd sit on the internet and I'd do a bit of research. And I discovered the Vagrancy Act, where my name comes from. The Encouragable Rogue is a derivation of Incorrigible Rogue, INC, incorrigible instead of encourageable. Incorrigible means someone who can't change. The Vagrancy Act is made in, I think, 1844, and it's full of lots of antiquated language. And the bit that talks about begging says that people shall not expose a deformity or any other, I think, behavior that is done with a will to bear arms, ALMS. And so to discover that, you have to look at what arms meant. I never knew what arms meant. I wasn't a religious person, which is where arms comes from, really. And so I looked in the Black Legal Dictionary. It said to give a virtue, to give and receive nothing in return. And so, you know, you put your thinking brain on and you think, well, does that apply to me? Of course it doesn't, because I'm giving something of value in return. When people buy a DVD with comedy on, they're not buying the value of the plastic. They're buying the value of the culture, the content that's held on side of the DVD. And so when you're doing a show, you're giving something of value in return. So, you know, I brushed that one off. And then, you know, blocking a highway, the North Terrace of Trafalgar Square is massive. It was obvious it wasn't, but I went and checked anyway, checked the Highways Act 1980. And learn about that one, check the case law with it. And it shows that blocking a highway is literally stopping people from being able to move through a square. So move that one away. And law after law, you know, I batted away and carried on working there. And then some days I'd see some other people working there. And then a few more people started working there. And then you get statues working on the sides and there'd be an old musician. And then other performers started queuing up working there. And that was when the council brought out the number 2 bylaw. It had been around for quite some time, but they decided that this was the appropriate piece of legislation to clear up this mess at Trafalgar Square.
So you were the one who was the troublemaker who caused all the people to come there and perform.
Well, I was just one of the people that broke ground there. I was there at the right time when they got rid of the pigeon feeding. Believe it or not, the south of Trafalgar Square. Actually, Trafalgar Square was offered to the buskers in Covent Garden, the street performers, by Ken Livingstone in the 90s. He said, you can come and do shows here. Please do shows here. And people went and took a look at it, saw all the pigeons and thought, oh, no, I don't want any of this, and left it behind. Biggest mistake they ever made, you know. Thankfully, now the pigeons have gone from that North Terrace. I could start doing shows there, and I had the stubbornness, the right ingredients to understand challenging authority, and to be prepared to do it. And, you know, the stubbornness perhaps from the stories my father told me when I was young, to put my feet in the ground and try and stick up for what I believed was right, which is what he told me they were doing when they tried to, you know, topple Thatcher with the mining strikes. And well,
I've taken you off from where you were going, which was bylaw, I believe, number 2.
Yeah, so they bring out this bylaw number 2 and they start showing it to people. And this bylaw says no person shall create a sound which is so loud, continuous or repetitive as to give reasonable cause for annoyance when asked by a council official or a member of the public. And they're using this like it's a brush to sweep the square clean. They're going up to statues who don't speak great English and just going, you can't do this here, and pointing at the £500 fine at the bottom of the notice.
Hang on. Bylaw number 2, what is it? Is there a rule book and there's a number 2.
So the good rule in governance, the London Local Authority bylaws for good rule and governance is a law which enables London boroughs to make bylaws. And so the Westminster bylaw number 2 for good rule in governance is the second bylaw that they have on their list of bylaws, the laws that they made. You can look at it if you want yourself by going to legislation.gov and searching bylaw number 2, good rule in governance, Westminster, or you can do it in Google and you'll find it as well as a Westminster PDF. And so they're going and issuing this to everybody. And I'm sitting there with some other performers in the queue, because there's now a queue. It's a bustling pitch. It's a good place to do shows. And they all kind of go, oh, well, that's it, isn't it? You know, we can't work here. Look, there's a law against it. And I looked at the law and I said, well, but it says that you're creating annoyance. How the hell do they know we're creating an annoyance? Unless they're getting complaints about us, they can't claim we're being an annoyance. And luckily, a number of people in Covent Garden agreed with me. And we agreed that we were going to see this through all the way. And so I started just refusing. They come and show the notice and I go, no, I'm not going to go. Sorry, you know, please leave me be. I'm clearly not creating an annoyance. At one time, a film crew with a Westminster Council official came down to issue me this notice. And I said, has there been a complaint? And they went, oh, there was a complaint earlier on this morning. I was like, well, how the hell do you know it's me? That could have been Lord Lucan. There's no way you can say that I am creating an annoyance unless you can ask someone who says specifically, I'm creating an annoyance. This is ridiculous. And this film crew had to leave and look ridiculous on the film. It was a very, very pleasurable thing. I think it's an ITV program. And so this keeps going on and it becomes farcical. At one point, there's a few of us doing shows down at Trafalgar, and Westminster Council drive a street cleaning truck through my show as a method to try and remove everybody, get rid of all the people off the pitch. And I'm starting to become a bit more show savvy now. So as they bring the street cleaning truck to the show, I take my clothes off and I start cleaning in the water from the street cleaning truck. And they're having a hissy fit because I'm sure it's got chemicals in it, which isn't very good for you. And, you know, just they seemed lost at the fact that we used their energy against them, that this became this sad theatre, that they were trying to get rid of us and the people supported what we were doing. And this was just going to go one way in the end. So eventually, one of the council officials, they're having a training day in Trafalgar Square, and he comes to tell me to stop, and I say no. And he goes back to the guy who's training them, and the guy says, well, no, go get him now. And so they come to arrest me. They come to issue me with this fine for creating an annoyance. And I say, have you had a complaint? He says, no. And I say, well, you can't say I'm creating an annoyance then. I refuse to comply. They call the police down. The police come and they say, look, I'm just here to support the council. And I explained to the guy, I go, look, you're not here to support the council. You're a peacekeeper. You're meant to be impartial. Look at what the law says and tell me, is this satisfied? And he refused. And I said, look, I refuse to give my name. I refuse to comply. This is not law. You are not acting within your powers. And so they arrest me and I get taken to the police station. I'm held in the police station for 3 hours. They seize all my equipment and they take me to court. And I think I went to court maybe 6-7 months later. So they keep my equipment all of this time. And I go to magistrates court. And in magistrates court, I knew, because we chatted with our legal team, that we wanted to lose, because you have descending authority in British courts. And so if you win in magistrates court, there's no descending authority. It's not like it's going to have an effect on the lower courts because you've won at the bottom. So we wanted to lose. But even though we wanted to lose, I still got kind of emotionally engaged with it. I still teared up at the end of it when we lost, you know, because you get caught up in the moment. And so, yeah, we lose. I apply for an appeal, which was always part of the plan. Bymans gets the better solicitor, a really, really good shit-hot solicitor, barrister, sorry. And we go forward to the appeal case, which is in the Crown Court, which is in the higher court. So now if anybody gets done with this again, the authority from the Crown Court now applies down into the Magistrates Court. So in the bottom court.
Creating a legal precedent.
Yes, exactly that, an authority.
Well, maybe we better explain, you better explain the idea of precedent so people, not everybody knows.
Okay, so in British law, the way that judges make judgments is they look at, or the way a barrister will argue a case to a judge and the way a judge will consider a case is by looking at judgments that have been made before. And if a judgment is been made on a case in a higher court, it's called an authority. It's an authoritative judgment. The judge has to take this into consideration. Doesn't have to follow it, but he has to take it into consideration. So it's a strong thing to have. The way our laws are used, majority of the country, is they're used by not just the writing of what the law means, but by the judgments that have been made on that law previous. So, for example,
yes. So what's happening is that through the courts, judgments are being made, or decisions are going to be made, which then become part of the law, so that when someone goes to court in relation to something similar, people look at those judgments that have already been made, and they've created new law through these precedents.
Exactly that. And so just before I go for my appeal, a guy called Andrew Ralph, who is now the head of enforcement at Westminster Council and the main driving force in Westminster Council, in my opinion at least, in Westminster Council's licence scheme, which will criminalise...
Let's put his name out again, if not heard of.
And Andrew Ralph.
Yes, Andrew Ralph.
Yeah.
Is it Ralph?
Ralph, R-A-L-P-H, Ralph.
Okay.
He comes up to me, and when I'm sat on pitch waiting to do a show just before the appeal, and he says, Matt, you should give up the case. You should give up the case because we've got endless money. We'll take you to court forever. If you win here, we'll just appeal it and appeal it and appeal it. You'll be ruined. You might go to prison. I don't want that for you. Kind of leaning on me, being really quite, heavy. He doesn't give up. He's there for about half an hour, just talking in my ear, telling me I should give up this bloody case. And I'm going, no, I'm all right, thank you. No, I'm quite fine. We'll have our day in court. No, thank you. And I know he was doing that because he knew they were going to lose. So he knew they were going to lose hard.
Basically, even though he was saying it as if he was being nice, he was actually threatening you.
Oh, 100%. 100%. It was meant to be a threat. It was meant to unnerve me. It was the only reason he said I'm doing this as a friend was him trying to position himself in a fatherly manner. He was trying to play like a father. It's a interviewing tactic that's given to people. He was just leveraging and threatening me, trying to unnerve me and get me to give up. And I didn't. And they didn't take me back to court because, surprising enough, when we went to the Crown Court, our case was so strong that their expert witness didn't even turn up. They were so sneaky. They were using sound guidelines that were designed for being used for industrial buildings within residential areas as their guidelines for this. Westminster Council are very, very, very sneaky. Very sneaky. Particularly Andrew Ralph is a sneaky little creature. And so I go to the court, I win. I win basically the judge's verdict, which is something which Westminster Council can't seem to conceive. Even when I looked at their internal emails between each other for a Buskin London thing that we'll talk about later, they were talking about the reason that they lost. The reason that they lost was because they had expert witnesses. I don't think we've lost Mel. Oh, how strange. The reason that they lost is because my expert witness disproved the sound levels, and it had nothing to do with the sound levels. The reason that they lost is because they didn't have complaints. Sorry, I'm going to get Mel back in the feed while I'm talking. They didn't have complaints. That's the one thing they needed to make this case work, is to have complaints, to be able to verify I was creating an annoyance. It's a great shame that they haven't used this forever after that in other cases, because it's such an easy way to deal with people who are creating a genuine nuisance, is just get the complaint, tie it to the human being, and take them to court for being an annoyance. It's not unreasonable. But, okay, so we'll get Mel back in the feed now, and I'll start waffling again. I'm going to take myself out just so we're on. Hey, Mel.
My apologies to everyone. Like an idiot, I didn't have the power lead in the computer, and the power went off, and I went, oh, shit, and everything else, and panicked, and was trying to get back. Well, I'm back now, so.
Cool. So where was I? I've lost my train of thought now. Winning the case, number 2 bylaw should have been used. But what's happened that was interesting after that is that Westminster didn't realise that all they needed was complaints, something that's easily sourced if there is a genuine problem. they wanted to get rid of us all. They didn't mind whether it's a genuine problem or not. They just wanted to treat everyone as gone, in my opinion. But what happened then is Trafalgar Square became even more subscribed. More people started working there. They found out that the case was a victory and this was a safe place. And so people gathered. Lots and lots of people gathered at Trafalgar. And then over the next, couple of years, the challenge really was, next 3 years maybe, the challenge was to make Trafalgar Square workable, to make Trafalgar Square a place where we can all coexist. We lost Mel again. He's not doing well today, is he? And so the way we do that is you'd have people queuing in the middle, and then if a young breakdancing group would come and set up beside me, I'd then go and chat with them and say, hey guys, come and join us, queue up. And through a lot of effort between loads of us of just convincing new people that sharing the place is better, that everyone doing their own shows wouldn't work, a system evolved there, which was a system I'd saw before at the SouthBank with all the older buskers, which was sustainable. And it's one of the greatest things I think about these busking pitches is through a little bit of shoulder rubbing, you get to the point where you have hundreds of people in some cases sharing the space together with no bosses, no one telling them what to do. They just find a way to work together. It's amazing. Mel's going to be back in the feet. You've not got so much luck today, Mel, have you?
The internet, my computer went onto the wrong internet.
Okay, cool. I'm just setting this up now. Cool. So,
apologies, everyone.
You're not going to be the webmaster, we'll say that much. So what comes after this, shortly after this, is a thing called Operation Spotlight. An Operation Spotlight in Leicester Square, which is just north of Trafalgar Square, if you don't know it, was something that HLBA, the Hartford London Business Association, they paid the police, the most incredible, mind-blowing thing. They paid the Metropolitan Police Service to have a serial stationed around Leicester Square to remove performers. And at this point, there was a couple of breakdancers working there. They weren't the nicest guys in the world. I went there one day to go and do a show before this had happened. And they basically turned around to me and said, no, this is our pitch. And I said, well, I'm going to use it. You're not going to bully me off here. Either you share with me or we battle. And so they go, all right, we'll share with you, but we do 15-minute shows. So we're going to do 3 shows. You do 1 show. I said, all right, fair enough. We'll do that. So they did 1 show, went and had their dinner, ate their dinner on the pitch, went and did another show, came and got drinks, sat and drank them on the pitch, did the 3rd show, and then tried to do a 4th show. And I had to literally walk onto the pitch with my gear. And they said, no, we're doing another. And I went, well, battle me then. I'm not moving, battle me. And one of the older guys at the group realized I wasn't going to stop. And so told the other guys, come on, let the guy do his show now. And from there, that was kind of the beginning of getting the people who'd been in Leicester for the last few years used to using it on their own and refusing to share to start sharing. I think it's lucky for them that they did, because shortly after that, as I say, Operation Spotlight began. There was a police serial stationed in Leicester Square, getting rid of everybody, moving all the people out of Leicester Square that wanted to busk. And I heard about this. And so I'm sat with a guy called Tom Bell from the OK Crew.
Hang on, before you move on.
Yeah.
It's an important point here. We have a group of businesses paying the police force. Yeah. That means that the police force are now not neutral because they're working for a private company.
100%. 100%. And there was uproar about it at the time. People were complaining about it at the time. People were very frustrated at the fact that a private business interest, which is representing the majority of the business of the area, but a private business interest can leverage the use of the police. And let alone the fact they're leveraging the use of the police for something that they have no lawful right to do. And so I hear about that. And I've got a reputation now as a guy who challenges police and authorities on stuff. People ask me my opinion on things. So I think, right, okay, I know enough about the law now. I've learned all the laws near enough that are associated with public spaces. I'm going to go down there and see what's going on, So I go down there and I go with a guy called Tom Bell from OK Crew, really cool group of breakers. And I take my box there and I bang my tennis racket on the box. And as I bang my tennis racket on the box, I don't try and start a show. I don't gather a crowd because I don't really want a crowd. I know that I've got Tom with his video camera. Tom's going to film me. And I'm just going to get the police officer to tie down what they're going to arrest me for before I begin. And then I can decide whether or not I want to begin and get arrested for it. And so I bang the box. And sure enough, a police officer walks over to me quite quickly and says, you can't be here. And I'm like, well, why? He said, oh, the bylaws. What bylaws? Went, the bylaws. You can't be here because of the bylaws. And I said, Tom, can you film this, please? Can you please tell me which bylaw you're going to use? Because I don't want to break the law, but I want to do a show here. And unless you can tell me why I'm going to be breaking the law by doing a show, I'll assume that what I'm doing is lawful and I'll carry on. And so she goes, oh, just the bylaws. I went, okay, well, look, I know a little bit about the law. And if you can't tell me the law, I'm going to carry on. Maybe it's best you get your sergeant. Can you get your sergeant of the serial? Can you get him down here? She goes, all right, I'm getting the sergeant. Gets on the radio and calls the sergeant down. So the sergeant comes down and goes, right, well, the reason you can't be here is because you're begging. Well, begging, really? The Vagrancy Act, 1844. Quoted the legislation, a section of it, quoted the Black's Legal Dictionary because I had experience of it from being at Trafalgar. He went, all right, well, the problem is you'll be blocking a highway. Go through that again. And we go through, the Metropolitan Policing Act, which is 1846 or something like that, a really old piece of legislation. We go through about 8 different pieces of legislation, all of which at the time I could quote off by heart. And he goes, all right, well, we'll get Westminster Council down here, shall we? So they get the Westminster Council wardens down here, and bless them, both of them were thick as 2 sticks. And they just go, oh, no, you listen to the police officer. It's like, but he's asked you down to explain the law. Which law are you using? The number 2 bylaw. I went, okay, my name's Matthew Boden. You do a bit of research. I challenged this bylaw. I got arrested for it. I went to Crown Court, and they found that you couldn't use this in this way. I have a case and authority in my name on this. And they went, no, you just listen to the police officer. I went, okay, you don't understand what's going on. Officer, this is fine. Please tell me what law I'm breaking, otherwise I'm going to begin. And this is all on film, like 45 minutes long. And then he goes, right, well, I'm going to get the head of council enforcement down, and then you'll be sorry. Oh, okay, all right, fair enough. Let's wait for the head of council enforcement to come down. So the head of council enforcement comes down, and as he arrives, he just looks at me and goes, oh, because he recognizes me.
Who is the head at that time?
At that time, I can't remember his name now. I knew the guy's face, but it's a long time ago. We're talking, this is 7 years ago. Maybe not that long as a lot of people remember the stories, but I can't remember the guy's name, but I remember his face forever. The way he looked at me, the way his hands went into his head with the sergeant next to him chatting like 30 feet away from me, and he just went, oh. And the sergeant came back and had a big smile on his face, shook my hand and said, well, it appears that you can work. You're not breaking the law. Had a big smile on his face. And he was a good buddy from then. He was really nice. I still talk with him. I think I'd earned his respect. The fact that I knew the legislation, I knew my shit. I was polite with him. I never lost my temper. I never lost my cool. We used the camera, which was, it wasn't as common as it is now those days. In those days, to kind of leverage him to behave and treat me reasonably and lawfully. And so I worked there for about 3 months with no one else there because the bug had got around that everyone got arrested. And every person I saw, I was telling them, no, you can work here. It's fine. And it slowly became a place to work, bit by bit, just like Trafalgar. People came back. People started working again. People came and queued. Guys from Covent came and queued up.
Right, Mark, you could have been the only performer. It could have been your pitch.
I was the only performer sometime. I made good money, for a good 3 months. It was August and September, and just started to fill up in October. I made good money. Operation Spotlight paid my way for quite some time. And so after that, let me get to my notes and find out what we're doing. I just want to get the chronology of this right. And so after that, I'm in Covent Garden. And Covent Garden's usually fine. You have very little problems in Covent Garden. But one of the Westminster Council officials, he had a bee in his bonnet about me standing on a bin. He had a massive problem with me standing on a bin. Didn't want me to stand on a bin, even though the licensing agreement from how many years ago said that the bins were there to be stood on by the performers. And so this was the initial issue.
That I used to love those bins. because I used to start the show by standing on the bin and then falling in.
There you go. And so I loved standing on a bin because my whole idea of standing on a bin was that you're high up. It's this high status position being high up, but it's an incredibly low status thing to be standing on. It's something which, as you're behaving high status to gather a crowd, completely undermines you by being in the bin. I just love the aesthetics of it. And so there's a completely almost superfluous, but kind of not because of the way the story ends, incident which causes me to have a big clang about this using a bin. And so I'm at the Magician's Corner, which is the top bottom of James Street, top of Covent Garden,
which is now next to Apple. The Apple
which is next to the Apple Store, exactly that, yeah. And so I'm there, and there's a musician down at the end, a traditional Chinese musician who's annoyed with the magicians. And so his way of dealing with it is he's playing music in a CD as loud as he can, pointing his speakers at them. And they can't work, and I can see the distress. And I've been there for 15, 20 minutes, and it's getting a bit much. So I think, well, I'm going to go and try and, deal with this. And so I walk up to him, I go, look, it's enough now, mate. Like, turn it down. They've got the point. And he just ignores me and carries on. So I turn the speakers around and point them at him. And I go, look, it's really loud, isn't it? It's enough now. Please stop it. And he goes mad and runs up to me and starts throwing kind of side open hand punches at me on my arms like this. And I can tell he's not trying to hurt me. He's just kind of being really emotionally evocative. He's shouting at me and do this thing, but he's not punching me in the face. He's not really trying to damage me. He's just being very emotive. And at the same time as that, I see a security guard rugby tackle him across the square to the ground. And another one runs up to me and pushes me and grabs me and says, right, you leave the area now. And I say, no. He said, I told you to fucking leave the area now. I said, look at the situation. I had my arms down. I was talking calmly. I wasn't creating any kind of disturbance. I was, in fact, being attacked. I'm not going to leave the area because I don't want to. He said, right, give me your name. I said, no. No, in fact, you give me your name. You just assaulted me. You've just pushed me. Now you swore at me. Now you've told me to leave the area. And I don't want to do any of that. And you're a CIS badge holder. You're held to certain standards. I'd like to see your badge, please. I'd like your badge number. And he said, no. I said, look, I'd like to see your badge number. He said, no, you try and get me fired, mate. I'm going to fucking kill you. And, oh, really now? Okay, so now you're threatening me with murder. I'd like to see your boss. Please get your boss now. And so the boss comes down. They go, look, none of them are wearing badges. CIS says you have to wear a badge. None of them are identifying themselves. He's just assaulting me. This isn't reasonable. I'm going to go to the police station after this. And so I go to the police station after that, and I make a report, and they go and question the guys. And funny enough, they all wear badges now, and they all have the numbers showing, which is what they didn't do before. And so I realized the night that I've gone to the police station, there's going to be comeback for this. I knew they were going to give me some shit. Somehow they'd find a way. And so I sit there that night and I think, how can I deal with this? If they come into my show and try and ruin it, how can I use that to make the show better? And I was really, really enjoying watching the last speech from the great dictator performed by Chaplin. I'd watched it a lot with a piece of music behind it. I can't remember which piece of music, but it was a beautiful escalating piece of electronic music. And I thought, I'm going to use that. And so I sat and I wrote it down, all of it, all the way through. And I found the bit which was powerful that I wanted to use, which is the bit where soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, drill you, die you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Really beautiful speech. It's a lot longer than that, but I'm not going to go through it all right now. And so I learned that speech. I write in this red notebook, and I just have the notebook with me just in case. And sure enough, predictable as daylight comes at them every morning, I'm in the show. I'm stood on the bin. I'm in the middle of the show. I've got about 200 people watching me.
This is on the West Piazza.
On the West Piazza, yes. Suddenly I see a little herd, for want of a better description, of security guards moving their way into my edge with a council official. So I step off the bin and I go, what are you doing, guys? And as I'm doing that, I'm going through my bag to get this red notebook out. And they go, we've come to stop this show because you're standing on that bin and we don't want you standing on your bin. Oh, really now? Okay, well, I know why you're doing this. Straight back up on the bin, because I know that if they want to stop me, they can grab me on the ground and there's not much I can really do. It's going to look a bit sad. But if I stand on top of the bin, it's going to be incredibly violent for them to drag me down off that bin. It makes them have a higher bar of assault and of commitment to doing me. And, you know, it's a really long way for them to do it. It's much harder for them to justify it. And so I stand up on the bin and I explain what's happened to the crowd. I explain what happened the day before. And I said, I knew they were going to come and do this. So I've prepared a little speech. And I flick it to the page where the speech is. And I start reciting the speech. And as I'm reciting the speech, the crowd builds. And I could see the people in the crowd are proud and they're kind of emboldened and they're swelling up. And it's beautiful, you know, to see these people giving me love and respect for this. And as I'm reaching the peak of the speech, I see a lady run down from the office, run through the crowd, run to the security, usher them out of the show, and they just scatter and disappear. And so as I finish the speech, I get a massive standing ovation. The crowd goes bloody mad. I make an incredible hat. I managed to use their plans to destroy me because of a little forethought and understanding how to manipulate the situation to make the show better, to make the show actually something unique. It was a unique experience. A couple of performers very kindly said it was one of the most amazing things they ever saw, to have this real jeopardy, a real situation, and to use, you know, a 50, 60-year-old film quote in front of a crowd of people and have the people cheering. It all work. It was a beautiful moment. I was really, really, really proud of it.
I just to add for viewers, if you don't know, comes hopefully most of you have heard of Charlie Chaplin. He had a film called The Great Dictator, and that speech you can see on YouTube. It's on quite a few YouTube videos.
Yes,
a very famous Charlie Chaplin speech.
It's a beautiful speech. I advise everyone to check it out. If you type The Great Dictator speech, you'll get it. And so after that, I go to the SouthBank. The SouthBank's been licensed for a long time at this point, the place where I began. I was particularly aggrieved at the fact that there was licensing going on there, and I wanted to get it used.
Hang on. Just for those who haven't watched part one, Matt started by doing a show. It wasn't a show, but sat down, what they call
contact balls. Yeah, they're small acrylic balls. They look like they're glass. Everyone tells you they're glass, but they're acrylic.
So he jumped from contact juggling to doing 4 big circle shows to where we're at now.
Yeah, and so so I'm doing these big circle shows. I decided to go back down the SouthBank and try and open up the stretch again like it was when I began, so anyone could work there who wanted to work there. At the moment, you need to go for a license, and the licenses are very restrictive. They refuse a lot of people licenses based on their own personal tastes. I was there at the beginning of the license system. They were telling me what jokes I could tell and I couldn't. One of the reasons I left and went to Trafalgar Square. And so I thought I'm going to go and open this back up. And as I start using...
To disturb you. That's really interesting because it will come up later in this interview. But I don't think it's very just that council officials can start coming along, or security guards, and saying you can't use that joke or you can't use that joke because that's censorship, and we are supposed to have got rid of that.
I agree. I completely agree. Mel, can I ask you one more favor? Can you log out and log back in again? Because you've got a lot of echo on your sound. Is that okay?
You're just
no, I'm not. Trust me, I'm not. You've got to. So just close the window, open the window back up again. Go to Messenger, use the link, go back in again.
All right.
And I'll answer your question while you're doing that. And so, yeah, I think it's really problematic. It's really problematic to have council officials, having security guards, having business owners decide what content you have in your show. And the reason I think that's problematic is, look, for example, in the SouthBank. The SouthBank, somebody complained because I did a line where I told two... And I claimed... that the kids should fight to the death. And she said, well, I just don't think that should be said. It's completely innocuous. It's completely ridiculous. Of course, that's something that's playful and farcical. And the fact that one person didn't like it suddenly means that I can't say it when hundreds of people, laughed and had joy from that statement for many, many years. But because you've got a business owner who just wants to please everybody, so he's willing to take any complaint as being valid, or a council official who believes that if somebody's annoyed, then God damn it, you have to deal with it, or even a security guard. I had one person at one point tell me that I can't describe myself as monkey boy. Say, come on, what am I, some kind of monkey boy? And they say, oh, no, that's racist. Well, it's not racist. What the hell are you talking about? But because that one person thought that, they would, if given the authority of a license, be able to stop you.
Well, so there's an important point there. There is legislation to stop hate speech and various other things, but there isn't legislation about jokes unless they're hate speech.
There used to be a section in the Public Order Act about offence, and it said that creating offence is a criminal offence. It was section 13 of the Public Order Act. Holded, yeah? No, I can hear you. It looks like you're muted, but you're not. That was where your sound problem was coming from. For some weird reason, the app needs me to mute you to be able to hear you. How weird is that? Yes, exactly. So I'm just going to quickly share while I'm talking about this. So in fact, Mel, can you riff for a few moments while I just share the video on the forum platforms? Well, it was, but we'll get to that. So basically, I'm there. I've got the kid out. We're doing the kid routine. The show's going really well. Great show. Turn around. Security guards going to the equipment. And I go to tell them not to touch my equipment. And then all of a sudden, a hand reaches down from behind me and grabs me in a chokehold. And I remember while this guy's in the chokehold, the thing I think about is a video I watched a few weeks ago on Facebook of this Canadian performer getting wrestled to the ground by security. And I thought, I can't hear Mel. So, yeah, you are muted. So I worry about the fact that I don't want to look like this Canadian guy who's got wrestled to the ground. And it looked really sad for him. And I thought, I don't want to be that. I don't want to get wrestled to the ground by a security guard and it just be this sad performer's video that gets sympathy. I want to win. I want to show that you can, fight against security and you can come out of it better. And so I think, okay, well, I've got to get him off me. So I try and move my shoulder to throw him off me, but the guy's on me like a limpet. He's attached to me. And so as I try to do this, another 2 security guards come and grab each of my arms. And so now I've got an arm held here, and the guy with his hand around my throat. And I'm thinking, well, what the hell can I do? They're trying to take me down to the ground, but it's not working. So I go, okay, I know what I'm going to do now. I'm at the SouthBank. The river's behind me. So I turn around and I frog walk all 4 of us, over to the fence. And I reach the fence. So we're on the SouthBank and the fence is over onto the river. And I go, are you ready, guys? Are you ready? Because you're all coming with me. And then I put my hands onto the fence, lift myself off the fence. And as I lift myself off the fence, the guys all release me and they scatter like bits of pepper on water when you put soap in. They just go, whoa. And as they all scatter, I then turn around, proud, full of energy, and stomp back to the center stage and say, shall I continue the show? And the crowd goes fucking mental. They scream, they cheer, and the security guards just leave. They just know that they can't do this again. Everyone's going mad. They're supporting this. They risk
the big line.
Yes, exactly. And so I turn around. The kid that I had as a volunteer is crying. So I go up to the kid and go, I'm really sorry, mate. Here's the £5 I said I was going to give you. You don't have to come to the rest of the show. And I finished the show. I made quite a good hat as well, as it happens. And so after I finish the show, I go straight to Brixton Police Station. I show them the video evidence that one of the members of the audience has collected of this guy grabbing me around the throat and me being like this and, moving over to the fence, trying to lift myself off and then scattering. And so I show this to the police officers. I go, well, this is assault, isn't it? It's private
assault and battery.
Yeah. And they go, well, you know, they certainly aren't allowed to do that. And they go down and they question the security guards at the SouthBank, and they're ready for a prosecution to go through on it. And I, at that point, just let the process go. I don't carry it on. I drop charges because I didn't necessarily want the security guards to get nicked for it. I mean, I felt bad for them. They're not the cleverest guys in the world, and they're only doing what their gaffers told them to do, what they think they can do. And in reality, they have no right to do it. They have no right to grab someone around the throat at all. But because their bosses told them to do it, they kind of thought they did. And so the questioning and the police being down there and the possibility of a prosecution was enough there. So when I went back down there in the future, they never, ever manhandled anybody anymore. And that pitch is still a working pitch to this day. People are working that pitch during the lockdowns. It's the safest pitch in London, it seems. One of the things that happened in that show, and it was one of the reasons why I know that what I do has at least some minute value. The kid in my show, I was working in Covent Garden the next day. This was a Saturday. So on the Sunday, I had a show in Covent Garden, and I see the family again. And when I see them, they beeline and come straight up to me to talk to me. And I say, you know, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry about that. I hate for your kid to have to go through that experience. You know, I feel bad, you know. I just, you know, I couldn't let it go. I had to try and do something about it. And the dad goes, no. We think that was a really valuable experience for Timothy. We all sat together that evening. We talked about the reason people do things, and we talked about why people do things in public and what happens in public and the way things, and we think it was an incredibly healthy thing for him to learn about. And that was something that I've held that with me, you know.
Yeah, lovely story. I mean, it's wonderful that they came and talked to you.
Yeah, and they gave me a gift by telling me that. One of the reasons that I do what I do is because I believe that you do change the world bit by bit, like ripples on a pond. You influence other people. You can't change the world, all of us at least, by having huge amounts of power and influence. There's only so many, you know, seats in the throne room. But you do always, every day, every second of your life, have an effect. People watch each other. People are continuously learning from each other and taking cues from each other about how to behave, about what you can do, what you can't do, how you should hold yourself, how brave, how small you should be. All these things are learned from each other. And so to have that confirmed, that kid now, for the rest of his life, will carry with him the idea that you stand up for yourself in public against inferred authority if you believe something's right, is something I think is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, but also on a very simple level, this whole, I don't know what you call it, podcast, Encouragable Rogue, all street performers who've ever been on it. And what is it, 70 now?
This is the 79th interview.
All these people have told stories about the hours and hours and hours of enjoyment that ordinary members of the public, whether they're rich or poor, have experienced. And that's just one example. Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, collectively, between all the people that interviewed, the people they've entertained, you talk about many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of people. I mean, I worked it out myself. I think I've entertained millions of people myself, but millions upon millions of people in my 2 decades of performance. Imagine it. You do like nearly 1,000 people a day. You do that 200 days a year. Then you only need 5 years to go up to being, you know, 1 million. And then you do that for the rest. It's
all these street performers everywhere, all over the world.
Yeah.
The amount of laughs that they've created.
Well, you know, one of the things that I heard a guy who I don't always agree with about everything, but it's a guy called Sham. He said that he believes street performers were the canaries in the coal mines. That when you see a society that doesn't allow performance in their public squares, that you know that society is a society in trouble. And I think that in our society, we in the early 90s had this slow progression of freedoms in public, this slow fight to chip away at all the ridiculous rules that were hanging around from the Second World War. You know, when we had a lot of public control of the spaces for kind of good reason. You could argue if you're at war. We were slowly demolishing them over this time. We'd come to the point, I think, in the 2000s, 2010s, where we had peak freedom. You know, we could perform in all the public squares in Westminster, in London. We could do more or less what we wanted as long as we weren't hurting people, or less we weren't inciting hatred, being grossly offensive. And that's just seems now that they've been fighting over the last 10 years and slowly making small gains, chipping away at that. And I think
go back to that towards the end of the interview.
Yeah, of course we can.
Because we're now at the stage where you just talked about opening up the SouthBank again. Where does your story go after that?
And so, have we talked about Camden yet?
No.
Okay, so
very aggressive. It was no, we haven't.
I'm trying to remember. I've got my list in front of me, and I've kind of buggered my order up as I'm talking. My chronology's gone out of sync. So, Camden has a license. It's had a license for a long time. It's had a license about 4 years now, 5 years. And I read through the license and discovered that if you don't use an amp and you're a mime or something such like a juggler, you're exempt, because Camden Council were concerned about freedom of speech and about the license infringing upon freedom of speech. You don't really want to stop someone from expressing themselves in public, at least before. Now we're trying to tinker with the Human Rights Act. Now that we're leaving during Brexit, it's all a bit more up for play. But so you're not got an amp, you're not playing music, you're exempt. I realised, okay, I can go and work in Camden. I'm going to go and busk in Camden. I'm going to make a point of busking in Camden and try and show that we should be performing in public, try and challenge the license by finding the little loopholes that are within the license. And so I start performing there, and sure enough, as soon as I start performing there, council officials start giving me a lot of shit. If you look at the first video, because this interview's got split into 2 videos, the first video at the beginning of that first video, and if it isn't posted, I will post the link to the video up after this.
The police woman.
Say that again.
With the police woman.
The police woman's something slightly different. That comes slightly after, but it's slightly after the police woman. I just put that in at the beginning. There's a policeman at the beginning of the video, which I'll save it. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So in that video, in the middle chunk of that video is me in Camden. And there's a Camden official, and he's standing around telling me, "Oh, you can't do this." And I went, "Well, I can do this."
Where in Camden is that next to the station?
I'm just outside of the tube station, just sort of where the advertisement is. There's a big billboard, and it's about 40 feet away from the tube station. It's the only
the bank.
Opposite the bank. Opposite the bank. Opposite the bank, where the wooden boarding is. So if you look at where Covent Garden tube station is.
No,
Camden tube station. If you look at where Camden tube station is, if you look at the main high street and then you just go on 20, 30 feet down past the tube station, that's where I'm walking. It's not a huge amount of space, but it's enough to do a 20-minute quick bangy outy show. And so I start doing the show, and he goes, no, you can't do this. I said, oh, do you want to debate about it? And he said, all right, I'll debate you. And so I stood up and said, everybody, shall we do a show? Everyone cheers. He goes, I don't think you should do a show. And I turn around to him then, and it's a bit treacherous, but I turn around and go, look, I'm not here to debate with you. I'm here to do a show. Please leave me alone. And so he gets pretty annoyed, and I'm sat there talking with a crowd. I'm trying to keep this show going. He's turning around to the entire crowd and going, excuse me, everyone. I just believe you should leave. You should move away. You should go. Everyone's hating him. I'm having to spend half of the show stopping people beating him up, because Camden's quite a rough place. People are starting screaming in his face. People are trying to take my racket off me to hit him with the racket. And so majority of my effort in the show is trying to keep everybody calm, stopping this becoming a riot, which I managed to do just about, and finish the show and hat the show. As soon as I finished the show and hat the show, I announced to everyone who's watching, I say, look, guys, please stay. If you want to see how to deal with a council official when not doing a show, come and watch this. And I'm doing that for 2 reasons. So the first reason is that I want everybody to learn how to deal with authority, to learn how to challenge authority, how to be able to deal with when authority oversteps its boundaries in a public place. We have to keep defending this. You know, the only thing that power needs to, illegitimate power needs to become legitimate is for people to allow it. And so I want people to watch for that reason. But also as well, I know that my safety hinges upon there being a reasonably big crowd of people watching. The police are very unlikely to grab you and hold you down on the ground illegitimately if there's a large group of people watching. And so I turn around to the guy and instantly go, look, I'm exempt. I'm exempt. You've hassled me this entire time. I don't want you to deal with me now. I want you to go. I'm going to do more shows. And he goes, okay, well, we're going to call the police. I say, oh, great. Please call the police. Please call the police. Because I am not, I am exempt from this. I don't need to be licensed. So the police arrive. When the police arrive, the first thing the police officer does is he comes up to you and goes, so what's happened here then? And so I go, well, I was performing. I was using my right to free speech, my right to freedom of assembly. And he's come up to me and demanded I need a license. He's harassed me the entire show. He's not left me alone. He's not let me engage in my individual enterprise. And now he keeps commanding me that I should leave the area, that I have to go. And then the council guy goes, well, look, we're not telling you to go. We're just asking you to leave the area. This weird double think they have in their brain. You know, it sounds almost ridiculous saying this now, but if you look on the site that I'm going to post this video, the whole show, the mess that it is, and the whole interaction after is on there. It's a 30-minute video of the whole show and the whole thing. And so the police officer turns around shortly after that and turns around to me and says, well, look, since you're doing a tennis racket, since you're a performer, and since you need a license, you're not licensed, I'm now going to issue you with dispersal notice to leave the area. And I go, well, look, hang on a minute. I'm exempt. Well, look at the law. And everybody, the council officials, are going, look, we've told you now, you need to leave. The council have made laws for proper reasons. It goes through cabinet. I'm like, well, but look, how am I the only person here that is saying, let's look at the law? You're bound by the law. You're bound by the law. You're bound by the law. But I'm the only person who wants to actually look at what the law says. And then I have to get a phone from somebody in the crowd because I want to keep filming. I don't want it to stop because I know that I need to take data on this for a court case. And so eventually someone gives me a phone and I get to the law and I read the exact passage of the law that says that if you're not using a microphone, you're exempt. And I read it out. And as I read it out, the police officer then turns around and says, well, it's obvious we have no powers to deal with you here. So I'm just going to leave you to do what you're doing. Literally turns on a dime from telling me he's going to issue me a dispersal notice to me reading the legislation out means that he completely changes what he was going to do, almost as if he's forgotten that he was just about to issue me the dispersal notice. This is the crazy thing about knowing the law. They're all police officers deal off instinct. They're used to using their gut to deal with stuff. And if you can hold them to a piece of legislation, a lot of time, if you're polite, you can be okay. And so at this point, the council guy's still giving me shit. And I'm turning around and going, look, mate, I showed you I'm exempt. You've hassled me now. You've been hassling me nonstop. I feel harassed. Please leave me alone. And what I'm doing in my head, I think is quite clever here, is I'm trying to set that guy up for a public order offence. This public order offence is causing a distress, alarm, distress, or harassment. Now, harassment needs to have a continuous nature to it. So if someone calls you a cunt on the street, you might be offended, but it's not harassment unless they follow you and keep calling you a cunt. So I then turn around and say, look, you've stopped my individual enterprise. You've stopped me from working for half an hour. We've now shown that you have no business with me. I've asked you to leave me alone and you won't. Please leave me alone. And I go and sit down in my box. When I'm sit down in my box, he comes and talks to me again. And I feel really cruel to him because he's not the brightest chap in the world. But I then turn around to the police officer and go, officers, I've asked this man to leave me alone. He's now been at me for half an hour. He has no legal business with me. I'm starting to begin to get really distressed now. Can you please protect my well-being? And the police officer has to go over to the council official and tell the council official to leave. And so the council official, bless him, turns around to me and goes, well, good luck with all your legal beagle stuff, and walks off with his tail between his legs. And so I give a bit of a chat with the council guys, the police, sorry. And I say, look, I'm not going to piss on my own place. And I'm polite with them and I give them a nice thing. And they turn around and say, just don't do this and this and this. Because they like to believe they've got something from you. So you go, look, I won't do that. I don't do these things. And they were reasonable things. Don't block the street. Completely fucking reasonable stuff. And they go on their way. And they never did that to me again. If you're seeing through a lot of these stories, what it takes a lot of the time is it takes a big stand. It takes, balls of steel mode to stand there and just be, hell for leather. If they're going to arrest you, they're going to arrest you. See it through, know the law, challenge it right, push it hard, try and keep a crowd of people around you. And if you can get to that point where you still come through and win, they don't want the embarrassment anymore. They just don't bother doing it. And so that was Camden.
It's quite a lot of work to know all that legislation.
It's a lot of work to know it. I've put a lot of effort in over the years, but it's not like I've done a degree. It's not like I've studied for 9 months non-stop. All I did was when I went back from doing shows in the evening times, I'd spend 4 or 5 hours, once or twice a week, looking at legislation and reading it, and then looking in Black's Legal Dictionary to get the words. Maybe. So next piece of the story is we're going back to Leicester Square. It's come to the point where Busking London, and Busking London, for those who didn't know, was an organisation set up by the GLA, and the GLA wanted to
Greater London Authority.
Yes. Wanted to, Boris Johnson, in fact, said he wanted to get rid of the red tape for buskers, which is a weird, strange double think thing for him to do because his constituency, Hillingdon, has the most draconian license in the country. It doesn't allow you to perform outside of a meter space. You can only perform during 12 and 1, 3 days a week. And it's really super draconian. But he's created this body to make busking free and accessible and to be self-managed. And although I have big problems with the organising body because they want to bring 500 new buskers to central London every year, they're all musicians because it's a musician PR company. I didn't like the way they worked. But I got along really well with all the street wardens. I knew them all personally, working there all the time. You get to have a reasonably good relationship with people. And I know that they're slowly developing this method of dealing with people using CPNs. And although I hate the antisocial crime behaviour and policing bill, because I don't like the idea of using a law which talks about detrimental effect on the neighbourhood because it's so loose, I didn't mind the idea of targeting people who genuinely were creating problems. Ever since my case in 2010, where I beat the number 2 bylaw, I kept challenging the council to say you should be using this on people who take the piss. You should be using laws on people that are unreasonable. So at the time, I didn't realise this. All I'd heard from the liaison guys working for Busking London was that there was some kind of turmoil in Westminster Council, that there was some kind of power struggle going on. And they've completely changed their enforcement technique. And so instead of working with the Busking London guys and gathering data to try and do the couple of bad apples that they have there, the people who are being crazy loud, the people who, play a full drum kit for 6 hours long in front of somebody's house, instead of getting the data to deal with them, they've got this new guy on there, this pitbull guy called James Joyce, and he's going around the street handing out CPNs to everybody.
Just before we move on, I think it's important to say that number 2 bylaw, as you said before, just means that the council can get witness statements that someone's causing a nuisance and then take them to court.
Yeah, but basically,
so they have the right to stop everything they want.
But yeah, just to say again, it's if people can be shown reasonable evidence to show they're creating a reasonable annoyance, i.e. drummer outside my house 6 hours long, I can't sleep or think. Reasonable annoyance. Beatboxer outside my premises playing music so loud I can't hear my customers. Reasonable annoyance. That is a reasonable annoyance. If you prove that, and the way you prove that's quite easy, you get a witness statement from the person involved, the business owner, witness statement from the council official, and if they had Busking London there, they'd get a witness statement from the Busking London official. Now, they had more than that to use the CPNs, to use the crime prevention notices or community protection notices. I can't remember the specific wording in the legislation. They had that stuff. They had loads of data. Busking London had been gathering data on the most complained people. They had complaint lists for months, for about a year.
Which they gave to the council officials.
Which the council officials were looking and liaising with them to use. They had it all rigged and ready to go. But what I heard happened, okay, and this is, I don't know this is what I heard happened, is that the lady running the whole licensing policy department went on holiday. The guys in the enforcement seriously hated the idea of having to work with busker liaison guys. So what they did when she went on holiday is, instead of following the advice they had, and I later learned this because I've actually gone through all their emails between Buskin London and the council. I went through their emails to prepare an argument for a later court case about the licensing, about the fact that they don't need it. And Andrew Ralph, who is the guy who was involved in this at the time, the same guy who I talked about at the beginning of the interview, putting the scarers on me, trying to get me to drop my appeal of the number 2 bylaw case. What they did when the head of the policy and licensing department, the lady who is running this, I'm not going to mention her name because I don't want to drag her name through the dirt. When she went on holiday, they got a guy called James Joyce, a councillor for Richmond, also a warden, one of these particular arsehole wardens. And yes, James Joyce, you're an arsehole. One of the particular arsehole wardens who enjoys hurting people. They got him to go and issue CPNs to everybody, irrespective of whether you got complaints or not. And so there was little girls with little tiny speakers this big. James Joyce going and issuing community protection notices on them, saying that he's going to take their gear and that they'll be given £1,000 fines if they keep performing. And you could see him enjoying it. He was enjoying the power he was doing, handing them out to everybody. So when I heard he started doing this, it pissed me off. I thought, right, this is the fight. This is the next fight.
Hang on. I think we need to say that that's your opinion.
What, he's an arsehole? No. Statement of fact. He's an arsehole. Yeah. I can't be just stand for calling him an arsehole.
Getting a young female singer to cry. It's on YouTube.
And he enjoys it. You can see he takes pleasure in it. He's a horrible, horrible man. And so when I hear about this, I think, well, fuck, okay, I need to research again. I need to find out about this. And so I read the legislation. The problem is the legislation is horribly written. It's very vague. It doesn't say much about how it's meant to be used and how to challenge it. And so I find out that James Joyce is he's qualified from the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health. He's an environmental protection officer. And so I go to the Chartered Institute of Environmental Protection website, and I find their practice notes for using CPNs, the notes that are given to train their officers in how to use a CPN. And so I write down all the relevant pieces about how you should and shouldn't issue a CPN, what it means to issue a CPN, how it should be used, quotes from the Lord's debates about the use of CPNs. And I carry them around with me, ready. Whenever I hear he's doing somebody, I run there to question him on, is he doing this, is he doing that? And every time, he's like a brick wall. He just ignores you and goes and issues the thing. He knows that he can just throw these things out if he wants to. And so one day he comes to me, and I've been talking with the busker liaisons guys from Buskin London, and they say, yeah, it's mental. It's like Westminster Council have completely gone off the rails. We have no idea why they're doing this. They're doing everybody. And I said, well, he's going to do me next, isn't he? And he went, yeah, he is. We reckon he's going to do you. And I said, well, look, do you have my back? I've had no complaints, have I? And he said, no, you've had no complaints. You're not someone who gets complaints, because I'm not that loud. Most of the time I'm just on a mic. The mic isn't that high up. So I don't create a huge amount of problems. I'm not blaring a big 500 watt amp or anything. And so sure enough, James Joyce comes to issue me with this complaint. And then I get my notebook out and I go through all the bloody details, and I go through all the practice notes that he's qualified to use, that he has to pass a test to be able to issue these things. And I ask him, can you show that I've got malign intent? Malign intent. And he says, what does malign mean? I'm like, what? Hang on a minute. This is from the body you're qualified for. This is their practice notes. And you don't know what the meaning of malign is. It's to have bad intent, to intend harm to another, malign intent. And he's like, okay. And I said, well, are you dealing with me on a case-by-case basis? This is something I saw really prominently over and over again in why and how CPN should be used, is they're not used broadly. You don't use them on a group of people or on an activity or behavior. You use it on an individual. And so I said, are you dealing with me on an individual basis? He went, well, I've got I've got impact notices in the area, which mean that I can come and issue this to you. If I didn't have the impact notices, I couldn't do it. I was like, but hang on, that's the definition of not treating me on a case-by-case basis. And so we go through all this thing. I turn around, I give him my name, I tell him I'm going to perform again. I perform again, I keep performing. He never issues me the notice after that. And he, a few weeks later, disappears, gives up, because there's such a huge backlash. We use the Public Performers Legal Network website to gather information. Every person that he's coming to buddy ask has now got the same information I had. They're saying similar things to what I had. They're filming him. If you go on the Public Performers Legal Network forum, there's like 20 videos at one point of him doing people. That in the end he gave up, and that whole use of the CPNs collapsed. Now I found out at a later date that the emails, the ones I said we prepared for a future court case, the emails between Westminster Council and Buskin London, the policy department, had talked to the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, and they gave the exact guidance that I was saying myself, that they need to use on a case-by-case basis. They need to gather evidence on the individuals. So the internal Westminster Policy Department.
So that would be just like bylaw number 2. They have to take individual, get witness statements to prove that person had done something that was causing a problem.
Yeah, they had to gather evidence on an individual. And so what I suspect had happened, and this is what I think is the reason why that went the way it did, was that the enforcement department, Andrew Ralph, who became head of the enforcement department after the guy above him got fired for this, who was also, I think, on holiday at the time this happened, was the architect of this. He sent the guys out without legitimate evidence, without legitimate information, tried to bully everybody off the pitch and clean it up in his way. And when it all failed, and because it failed, then it removed Buskin London's ability to use it on individuals, because it already kind of sullied all the people above him. They committed seppuku. They fell on the swords, and he got promoted. And then Rebecca Gordon, the lady who's now pushing through the license there, got promoted. And they're now the people who are pushing through license in the entire borough, claiming that they have no powers to deal with anybody. It's fucking
so
ridiculous.
It looks very likely that Andrew Ralph has got his own particular religious want or wish to get rid of street performers bit by bit.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the thing I said before at the beginning of the interview is he came to me, but it's not weird. It's not. It's look. Whenever you've met a busybody official who comes up and believes they should be able to get rid of you, and the fury of them not being able to get rid of you, that's him just in administration.
Mad.
So the last story I have today on the whole resisting police and council and everything else, although there's loads more little stories, I think these are kind of the more interesting ones. Or the last one I'm going to say today, at least. I'm in King Street. Now, King Street is a stretch from Covent Garden. It's been pedestrianised recently, and it frustrated me that nobody's been using it. Really frustrated me that no one's been using it. And I was putting up on Public Performers Legal Network to encourage people to use it. Musicians started using it right at the end, as far away as they could from the circle shows. So, you know, you're a good 150 meters away, the other end of the street. And they were working there for a little bit, and then suddenly they disappeared. And I was like, why? There should be more people working this. It's a busy pedestrianised street. Why the hell isn't Covent Garden becoming this flourishing place of diverse performance? You know, stuff happening everywhere all the time. That's what I would have liked to have seen, you know. And so one of the things I found out is that the performers on the West Piazza took a vote to say that people shouldn't perform on King Street, which I thought was just fucking annoying. The West Piazza, in my opinion, and Covent Garden is choking a slow death by individuals trying to protect their money on that pitch. My own opinion. But anyway, one day I decide to go on there because I hear what's happening. I realize why people aren't working there. What's happening is that every time someone turns up there, one of the shops calls, and then the council turn up and they remove people from the street. So I go on there and I start performing, and straight away the council turn up and they say, right, you can't be here. So, well, why? It's the same story over and over and over and over again for 10 years. They turn around and say, oh, you're blocking the street. So then I go through the legislation on blocking the street, and I go through the case precedent. I say, look, this is why I'm not blocking a street. Then they say, well, you're begging, you're this, you're that, the other. We spend half an hour going through these things. The police come, they say I have to leave. We go through all the things, the same, exactly the same as every other story we've said today. And the same thing happens at the end. Right at the end of it, once you exhaust all their bloody questions, they have to admit, oh, in the end with this one, I turn around and the council official leaves and just asks the police to deal with it. And as soon as the council official leaves, the police just smile and go, oh, it's done now, and leave. So people are getting stopped on King Street every day. And there's no powers to do it. They're just using inferred authority. And this is what so many people use. This is what so much of enforcement works off. It's not them having powers. It's them having inferred powers. Powers they don't really have, but it kind of feels like they have. And if they flex it the right way, and if they pretend in the right way, they can convince you they do. Because you might not be stubborn enough or persistent enough or know the right bit of information to be able to tell they don't. That's why I think, be stubborn, be informed, don't fucking back down.
I think probably this story of what you've had to deal with, most people aren't talking about, but it's part of what it is to be a street performer.
I believe it is.
Young people are being
well, I think that street performance is, like what we said before, the canary in the coal mine. I think the responsibility for street performers is being the front line of freedom. You're in public spaces creating culture. You're in public spaces helping people relax, engage, share with each other. You're in some ways, historically, the people who are challenging tenets of a society. If you look at the buffoon in France, the performers there drawing the chalk around themselves, mocking the well-statused people in society, that's you. And people are going to try and stop you more now than ever. Authoritarians will try and stop you doing stuff because they don't see that that's something that should happen. And I think it's our prerogative. It's our mandate as street performers to push and to keep those places safe, to enable people to go and culturally express themselves.
We can go further, but for most street performers, that's not their ethos. I mean, a whole bunch of street performers, their ethos is clock in, clock out, earn X amount of money, create a show, and that's it.
But it's one of the deaths of our art form is to see it as a job, to see it as a bank account. It's a field of fruit to go and be picked, and it's not that. You're affecting the world when you go out and perform in a public place. There's 300 to 400 people that's lives are very slightly different because they saw you.
Yeah, the people who are doing big shows and lots of money, they are making people smile. They're making people happy. So,
yeah, but Mel, I'd like to believe I do big shows and I make lots of money, but I still believe that we have an importance out there that's more than just cashing in and cashing out. A lot of people will be fine with the idea that a license is going to come in because they think, well, I can still make money. It's going to horrify me, the idea of a license coming in, because people will no longer be able to freely express themselves in the street. If I want to stand next to a business and complain about that business through comedy and clown, I can now very easily be removed because that business will complain. When that business complains, Westminster can go, we don't want you doing that here. It's causing offence. It's creating a problem. You have to stop it. And they will have the ability to criminalise me if I don't stop it because they'll remove my licence.
No, I agree with you. Saying that amongst the street performing community, there isn't a homogenous block. There's lots of people with lots of different viewpoints.
Completely agree. And one of the things as well is there's a lot of street performers who aren't part of the street performance community. You know, there's a guy who's a homeless guy who plays a traffic cone. I've listened to him over 8 years. He's got better at playing the traffic cone. He's really good at playing that traffic cone now. There's a lot of people within our community who have become well-established, really top-tier performers who come from being on the street, and they would have not been able to escalate, not be able to step up and learn and gather their skills if the avenue wasn't freely available and open to them. And it won't be with a license. So what I'm planning to do now, at least, is I'm looking, like I did in Camden, at the loopholes in this license. I'm looking at being able to experiment with this license and test what you can and what you can't do. And so I'm going to do, 5 different religions, 5 days a week. I'm going to go and talk to people and learn about these religions and then speak about them on a public place in a show. You
need to explain that there's loopholes in the law.
Well, in the licensing, so in the Local Authorities Act, 2003, I think is the one they're using. It enables them to license activities, but religious speech is exempt, political speech is exempt, and traditional activities like Morris dancing is exempt. So I would encourage anybody to engage in one of these activities. Go into a public space and do whatever performance you want to do with these activities in mind, and that's your way of working around this license. Also, protest is exempt, so anytime people are on pitch and they're protesting, you can't be asked for a license. Anytime
you ask for permission to protest?
No, you don't. No, you don't.
Is that depending on the size?
No.
If you're planning,
so if
March, you have to ask.
If you create disorder, then they can go to the organisers and they can claim that these organisers have created disorder. The soccer law, Serious and Organised Crimes Act, which demanded that you had to ask for permission to organise a protest, was overturned. I think Mark Thomas did a huge thing to overturn it, where he was applying for, I think, something like 250 different protests a week or something crazy. One day he's protesting for the fact that they need more orange juice. Another day he's protesting that there shouldn't be any more orange juice. So I imagine for our licensing problems in Westminster, we can do a similar thing. We can absolutely grind Westminster Council to the dirt by, for me, one day I'm going to be talking about how everyone should be a Tory. The next day I'm going to talk about how everyone shouldn't be a Tory. And the whole point of all of this is just to show that you shouldn't be trying to control behaviours in public places. We shouldn't control expression in public places. Westminster Council is not equipped to do that, and they shouldn't be doing that. And the fact that they're doing it specifically with great influence from a certain few business associations, like Halber, Heart of London Business Association, and the SouthBank. These are people who have a vision of what the West End should be like, and it doesn't include us. It might include the odd violin player here and there, but it definitely doesn't include us. It doesn't include me standing on top of a bin telling everyone I'm a loser and that they should watch me because of that. And so I believe that I should be able to stand at a bin and say I'm a loser. I believe that
hang on. So what we know now is that 95% of the complaints about street performers were about noise.
Yes, 95% was about noise. We did a freedom of information request on the complaints about street performers over the period of 2016 to 2018, I think. I think it was that. It might be 2017 to 2019. And 95 of them were about noise. I'd say a good 30% of them were noise between 9 at night and 9 in the morning, which is against the law.
What I'm saying is they never needed this license.
No, of course it
it's noise. If we go back to what could have been done, still could have been done, they could buy for any noise to get and get rid of them.
They could use that, or they could use the Antisocial Behaviour the Antisocial Crime Behaviour and Policing Act. They can use that as well with a community protection notice. Although I hate the idea of it, they could easily do it. They just don't want to make the effort. What they want to do is they want to clean the streets, and they're pretending like they're not, but that's what they're going to do.
Where we both agree.
The next
something else going on. It is about the noise at all. They're making decisions. In one sense, I think they street performers. I hate the busker, buskers and beggars. They look at buskers, beggars, anybody doing that sort of any entertainment on the street as some sort of cockroach vermin that they need to get rid of. And I actually believe that in places like Leicester Square and Covent Garden, they want to sanitize these areas to do with their own moral beliefs.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what they want to do. It's not necessarily just their beliefs, but it's their vision. It's their vision of what they think the area should be. And there being shows and crowds of people cheering and clapping and people playing music is not something they envisaged. They didn't want it. They've been trying to get rid of it for the last 10 years. And the last, as long as I've been busking, 17 years.
And you take somewhere like Leicester Square, Piccadilly Circus, Covent Garden, these are all major areas, not just for the people who live in Westminster, not just for the businesses that work in Westminster. These are fundamentally places of art for the whole of the country and for the whole of our tourist industry.
It's the capital. It's a centre for culture. It's where the entire country comes to meet and see each other and understand what it is to be British to some extent. It's in the capital.
Small group of people who are trying to control, sanitize these areas. They, in my opinion, they have no right.
Oh, I understand. Well, I don't think they have the right. I don't think they should. The reason why we have laws and the reason why the entire country has, at least used to have, the mandate that public spaces would only be controlled by laws that were created by government, and that these things would be very strict and very, minute, a slither of power to deal with something specific. So, for example, don't kill people, don't incite hatred, don't incite violence. These specific things are empowered in law to deal with for reasonable reasons. But the license now is going to turn around and say that anyone entertaining on the street is committing a criminal offence without asking Westminster for a license. Entertaining. If you gather a crowd of people and tell a few jokes because you feel like it, you are a criminal.
All right. So when we discussed it before, I looked up a book, and I want to quote from it. It's a book by a guy called Nathan Sharansky, and it's called The Case for Democracy. And in his book, he wrote, if a person cannot walk into the middle of the town square and express his or her views without fear of arrest, imprisonment, or physical harm, then that person is living in a fair society, not a free society. We cannot get the rest.
No, read it. I want to hear it.
Oh, just want me to have to speak. We cannot rest until every person living in a fair society has finally won their freedom. And what we're seeing in the centre of London is certain interests start to erode the freedoms that exist. They're not great big massive freedoms, but they are freedoms, and it's not right.
This is a story of our generation and our age. This is what's happening in every spectrum of society. As I say, I think street performers, we reached peak freedom maybe 2000, 2010, and they've been clawing it back. But in terms of the population as a whole, I think we reached peak freedom maybe 70s, and then from there, the story over the last 40 years has been a slow grabbing back by the fearful authoritarians, the people who want to lock down and control society. And it's maybe not even our battle. I think maybe we'll lose this battle. The weight of fear, the weight of worry, the weight of just make me safe, just deal with the problems is so heavy now that maybe it's the next generations, the generations ahead, who are going to have to claw back the freedoms that definitely you guys enjoyed in the 80s, that I enjoyed for a brief time through my life. I think that now it's going to be a spectacle to try and be free.
I've got pretty angry about certain issues. So, for example, Westminster Council, on the one hand, are trying to get rid of art in terms of street performing, and they know what they're doing and they plan what they were doing, and they're consultation with sham. At the same time as they're trying to get rid of the street performers, I walked down in Leicester Square and I counted 3 casinos, gambling. So at the same time as they're trying to get rid of art, they're bringing in the system for people to lose money.
But the thing is that the casinos pay Holborn and Westminster Council huge amounts of money. There's large, powerful business and economic interests stacked behind them. This is the problem, is that I don't leverage Westminster Council. I don't go for dinners with the people who work in the top of Westminster Council. I don't have the ability to quietly chat in their ear through huge mechanisms that interact with them on a daily basis, like Holborn.
So I've told you about this. I'm walking in Leicester Square, and there is a business. It can't work at the moment of COVID, and it's got a nice little space where you could sit undercover. And there's some poor guy who's homeless. He sat down, running his own business. He's not asking anybody for money. He just sat there, and 2 great big guys wearing a sort of red sort of uniform, who seem to be a private police force for
exactly what they are. They're a private police force. They're a private police force. They're a private company. They advertised in my Facebook feed the other day, asking if people wanted to join their police force. So I just put up a big sign of a Nazi community group. It was I can't remember the name of the group now.
But they moved. This poor guy was causing no problem whatsoever.
But you know why they moved him? Because it doesn't fit with their idea of the area. Someone sleeping in a doorway. The poor bugger has to get outside. Exactly that, mate. And this is one of the things that I think we have to, as street performers, help fight. You know, these big businesses, they don't get to decide what the streets look like. It's our street.
It's true. Covent Garden's brilliant. Covent Garden is owned by a South African company that invested in buying in the area because they want to make money from the area. Eventually, we believe that they want to sell the area at a big profit.
There's no question. This is what they put in their original business plan when they bought the area. Is what they want to do is they're going to buy up all the property in the area. They're going to improve the quality of the area, aka gentrify the area. And then once the property values go up to a level where it exceeds the debt from their loaning to service and increase the quality of the area, they're then going to flip the properties. That's their game. That's what they do.
And Westminster Council, hand in hand with this business, allowing them to change commercial property to private property.
Yeah, to turn into luxury flats. And then the luxury flats complain about the fact that it's a place for culture.
And it's nuts because Covent Garden has been a place of entertainment for years on years on years. And slowly, this South African company who don't care about art or the art in the whole country, because Covent Garden has people from all over the country and all over the world come and visit. And part of the reasons they come and visit is for entertainment. Yeah?
But Mel, they don't give a fuck about people going to visit there. Look at what happened to Masters Cafe. Masters Cafe was a good, cheap, affordable cafe. It was always busy, always full. It serviced the working class people that came to Covent Garden for a day out. They bought the lease to Masters Cafe and they tripled the rent on that cafe. Instantly, after the day they bought the lease, they tripled the rent. And Masters, the people who owned it, turned around and went, okay, we'll pay triple the rent because we're making enough money. They said, no. We're ending your lease. You have to go. Kicked them out because they were not part of their vision for the area.
What I've seen during COVID, I walked around Covent Garden, walked around the back, where there was 2 music pitches. There have been 2 music pitches for a long time. What have Capco done? They steadily allowed cafes and restaurants to put more and more seating out there. And I don't have a problem with those restaurants having extra seating in certain areas because they've got a right to make money and they've been suffering under COVID. They've got staff to pay, etc. So, yeah, that's fine. But don't take the space that means that the musicians can't work, which is what they've done.
But the thing is, you've got to remember, they don't care about the culture. They don't care. They believe that people will come there no matter what. They would happily, if they could have when they first went there, they would have got rid of the entire street performance there, Capco, happily. They got leveraged by Westminster Council giving a joint license to the performers and to them for the area. They got leveraged away from being able to remove the street performers. They would have happily got rid of us.
It's a shame because Westminster Council are collaborating. Nice word, that, collaborate. I'm not sure I like the connotations. They're collaborating, trying to sanitize the street and trying to remove street performing in the long run. And this is a resource that loads of people come to watch. And it's poor people and rich people and everybody. The amount of people I've met who don't have much money come in with their kids. They can't afford to go to lots of different things. They can sit for 2 hours and the kids will be happy for 2 hours. It doesn't cost them a thing. If they want to give the performer some money, they can. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah.
There's no one twisting their arm.
Exactly that, mate. Exactly that. And this is one of the big shames about the street becoming more and more and more sanitized and it becoming less and less accessible for people. Is it's something which is one of the last things that brings every class together. You get
makes me mad. This is my London. I grew up in London. They don't have a right to take away my London, but they're doing it.
Well, Westminster are supporting a South African company to make loads of money so they can flip it and fuck off back out of England back to South Africa again. Unfucking believable, mate.
It's truly amazing. All right, Matt, we've covered an awful lot. What more do you want to say?
Well,
maybe not so political.
Well, I think I'm going to end on something a bit political. I think that the next year is possibly the most important year for street performing in Britain. Westminster is one of the biggest boroughs. It contains the most street performers of the entire country. And come April, there will be a license. And that license is defeatable. We can defeat it. We can defeat it by performing, by tying at Westminster Council, by manoeuvring our way around it everywhere we can, by, at the moment I'm talking to theatre groups, at the moment I'm talking to teachers, talking to schools, talking to all different organisations, drawing them together so that in April we can drag Westminster Council through the dirt, while at the same time showing the brutality of what they are actually doing, not just it's a light touch, bullshit, but actually showing that they'll be arresting people, showing that they're criminalizing people, showing that they'll be dragging people off the street. At the same time as that, we'll have performers that are 80, but he's 70, 80 years old, performing in the street, getting dragged off by Westminster. We'll have 18-year-olds, but he's performing art students getting dragged off by Westminster. And if they don't get dragged off by Westminster, then why the hell is the guitarist standing on the street corner getting dragged off by them? It's going to be a shit show. It's going to be a complete shit dance that I want every one of you to be dancing with us in. It's unique.
I must admit, I agree with you, and I want to see a lot of young people coming out. If you're studying circus, come out and do circus on the street. Learn how to do it. There are street performers who will help you. If you're a dancer, come out, create a dance show. There is lots of possibilities, and it can be a stepping stone for other things. Because
I agree.
One thing you can learn on the street is how to perform, how to relate to people, how to listen to people, how to interact with people. If any young people are watching this, join in, come out, learn.
There you go. And I suppose we'll leave it at that, everyone. I'll see you.